welcome to the Wisdom Inspired Talk podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I am Yomi Akipelu, your wisdom coach, speaker, teacher, and author of Blow the Cap Off Your Capability and other books. In this podcast, we will learn from the wisdom of wise men and women from ancient and contemporary times. We will glean wisdom from books, biographies, teachings, quotes, and sayings of sages through the ages. So, let's dive right in. Today, we'll be speaking about boundaries. But first, let's start with a story. A football match was arranged for 22 young boys. After waiting for what seemed like ages, the referee still did not show up. The boys could not wait any longer, so one of the parents was asked to act as referee in order to avoid the huge emotional meltdown that would result from disappointing 22 energetic youngsters. The substitute referee was more or less press-ganged into the role. He had no whistle, nor did he make any boundary markings for the limits of the pitch, and according to him, he did not even know the rules of the game nearly as well as some of the boys. The game soon descended into complete chaos. Some shouted that the ball was in, others said it was out. The pseudo-referee wasn't at all sure what was in or out, so he let things run. Then the foul started. Some cried, foul. Others said, no foul. The referee didn't know who was right, so he let them play on. Then the kids began to get hurt. By the time the real referee arrived, there were 3 boys lying injured on the ground, and all the rest were shouting at the substitute referee. However, the moment the referee arrived, he blew his whistle, arranged the teams, and told them where the boundaries were and had them under control straight away. The boys then went on to enjoy a great game of football. Let me ask you, were the boys freer without rules, or were they in fact less free? Without any effective authority, chaos was the result. Although they could do exactly what they wanted, the game ended in mayhem, and consequently the result was confusion and the kids got hurt. The boys undoubtedly preferred that the game was played according to the rules. The boundary lines allowed the boys to enjoy the freedom of the game. The rules of football did not diminish the pleasure of the game, but rather enhanced it, and at the same time kept the children safe. You see, boundaries are not designed to take away the fun in life, but they're designed to enable the game of life to be enjoyed to the full without hurting or trampling on the rights of others. God's rules are His boundaries for life, given out of His love for us. His boundaries are not designed to restrict our freedom, but rather to give us freedom. Like the rules of football, they do not stop the enjoyment of the game, rather they enable the game of life to be enjoyed to the full and to minimize the chaos and mayhem that comes with a life without boundaries. Someone said, a life without boundaries is like a house without walls. Nobody feels safe. The 10 Commandments were given not to restrict our freedom, but to safeguard them. God loves you. He does not want you to get hurt or mess up your life and the life of others. That is why He gave us His instruction manual, the Bible. They are our boundary lines. And one of the dangers of living outside is loving boundaries. God's boundaries are intended to be a blessing and to bring a blessing. A boundary line is a line which marks the limits of an area. Boundaries can also be guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify for themselves what is reasonable, safe, and permissive ways for other people to behave around them. Boundaries must be set in relationships and indeed in every area of our lives. Don't ask the question, how close can I get to the fire without getting burnt. Instead, we should be asking, how can I set boundaries so I can stay as far as possible away from the fire? Children especially need boundaries to flourish in life. Without boundaries and discipline, children are subjected to a life of heartache. The support structure required for them to thrive is missing without boundaries. If we don't set boundaries for our children because we're afraid they won't like us for enforcing discipline, we are setting them up for pain. Stress of enduring a tantrum now and enforcing boundaries is nothing. I say nothing compared to the shame and the pain of regrets that they will have to endure when they become adults and they're stopped by the police, for example, for not keeping the safe boundaries of speed limits, or maybe evicted by a landlord because they are in arrears, because they have not kept that boundary of spending within their means, or maybe even contacted by a bank for defaulting on a loan due to not keeping the safe boundary of their spending limits. Now, throwing a tantrum at that point in their lives won't get them off the hook. No, it won't. So now is the time to enforce the boundaries, the discipline. Please do it for their future and maybe for yours too. Endure the confrontation or the pain now. Avoid the regret and the shame of a life without boundaries. Without boundaries in life, anything goes in or out. That, my friend, is a dangerous way to live. It's like a city broken down without walls, subject to attacks and destruction. But I know that won't be you. Boundaries are really important. Several years ago, sociologists and child psychologists made an interesting discovery. Contemporary thought assumed that putting fences around playgrounds made children feel restricted in their recreation. And based on that theory, it was decided to remove the fences so the children could feel freer and less confined. To the astonishment of the experts, the opposite effect happened. Researchers found that children became even more inhibited in their activities when there was no fence. They tended to huddle towards the middle of the playground, exhibiting signs of insecurity. Interestingly, when the fences were replaced, the children once more played with great freedom and enthusiasm and explored the entire playground without fear. Now, what's the lesson here? We all need boundaries, something to define the limits of safety and security and what is acceptable. The experts had thought that the boundaries restricted creativity, but the children on the playground proved that we need a clear understanding of what's safe and acceptable in order for ingenuity, creativity, and inventiveness to flourish. We all function better when we have clearly defined boundaries and we know the consequences of exceeding those boundaries. And that is all for today. Until next time, keep on growing in wisdom and maturity. Blow the cap of your capability. Be unstoppable. Be awesome. I'm cheering you on.